according to the wishes of the board last week, is that we're going to open up the comments. Since Member Pachegan is sponsoring this item, she'll make an opening comment. What I've asked is that we have one representative that is representing folks that are critical of high-speed rail, as well as those who are proponents of high-speed rail, to make opening comments. And I believe we have a Mr. Jeff Morales from the Rail Authority. Is that correct? And we have a Mike Brady, counselor for folks around the state, I presume. After their period of comment, which I'm asking that you try to limit to 7 to 8 minutes, no more than 10. You will be cut off at 10 minutes apiece. Then we will go out to public comment, and we have a stack of folks. Anybody in the audience wishing to comment on item number 6, which is the high-speed rail project item, please fill out a card and bring it over to the clerk to the board. This would be the time to have that item, that ticket filled out. Okay. After we have public comment, we will close public comment and then begin deliberations with the board. The board, after that, is free to ask questions of those that have spoken or authorities on this subject matter, so it doesn't end the exchange between the board and the public. It just stops public comment in its free form of 3 minutes. Madam Clerk, will you set the minutes when we do begin public comment? The first 2 speakers will have no more than 10 minutes apiece, and members of the public will have 3 minutes apiece. And what I'll do is I will ask Mr. Mike Brady. No, please don't come up. I want to ask you, heads or tails?
Tails. Tails.
It is tails. You get the choice to speak first after Member Pachegan makes her comment, or to speak second after Mr. Morales.
Go first.
Okay, that resolves that. Member Pachegan, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question. So questions to Mr. Brady and Mr. Morales will be at the very end of public comment?
No, at the very beginning of public comment.
Questions for them.
Oh, questions for them. Yes, yes.
At the end of public comment.
At the end of public comment.
Great, thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. I brought this forward today because so much has changed since November of 2008, when Prop 1A narrowly passed, the California voters narrowly passed 1A. At the time, the promises to voters were that the cost of the project would be about $33 billion. We now know that has doubled, with really no end in sight, and I plan to ask more about the specific numbers and higher estimates that I have heard. The project was to be completed by 2020. That has been pushed back several years. In May of 2012, this board convened with and spent a lot of time asking questions. We had representatives from the High-Speed Rail Authority here, voicing our concerns, basically, because we had a lot of concerns. And we were told, hold off, give us time, you know, we're working on it. Well, we did choose to hold off. We did give time, and we are now seeing the answers to our concerns and the answers to our questions, and it is completely different, in my opinion, to what was presented to the voters in 2008. In 2012, this board, prior to 2012, in 2007, a previous board had expressed support for California high-speed rail, the concept of California high-speed rail, in 2007. And so we're coming back now. We expressed our support for the plan. We have expressed our support for the plan in the past, but we asked that the cost was still an overriding concern. Mitigation was a huge concern, impacts to our businesses, our residents, and our letter of 2012 ended with, take the time to determine the economic viability of this project. Take the time to make sure this project is economically viable and will not cause our children and grandchildren to be paying for this 70 years from now. And so today, public opinion has changed. LA Times has reported that over almost 65% of the public would now like another shot at voting for the proposition because it has changed so much. And after 7 years, I've been here for 6 of them. After 7 years and a whole lot of discussion, I felt like we did give the time. We have been patient, and I don't believe it's too late. Funding has not been secured. Tracks have not been laid. So I believe now is the time for this board to take a position, change our position, keep the position from 2008, 2007, if that's our choice. But we've given the High-Speed Rail Authority, we've given the governor, we've given the legislature, we've given Congress over 7 years to develop a viable business plan to secure funding and to keep the promises that they made to the voters in 2008. And the plan remains flawed. The funding has evaporated, and the expectations and promises are not being kept. Now, there are some that would say, well, projects change. And yes, projects do change. No question about that. But there needs to be an obligation from somebody, either the authority, the governor, the legislature, Congress. Someone should feel like they need to keep the promise to the voters, because that's what they promised, and that's why the voters supported this. So I will, Mr. Chairman, reserve comments to the experts. Reserve my questions for the experts and closing comments.
Thank you, Member
Thank you.
Cheegan.
Thank you very much.
All right, that closes her opening statement. This is the opportunity for Mr. Brady, who won the coin toss, to speak first. After Mr. Brady, we'll have Mr. Morales from the Rail Authority, and then open it up for public comment. Mr. Brady, the 10 minutes or less, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the Board of Supervisors. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. The focus of my remarks are indeed going to be on that letter which was signed by Mr. Perea and sent on behalf of the Board of Supervisors May 6, 2012. In that letter, Mr. Perea said that he had serious concerns about some of the items that Ms. Bushigian has just mentioned, specifically the cost of the project. Was there a sound funding plan? Was there going to be 5 years of environmental delay? Were the voters going to get what they were promised when Proposition 1A passed? And what about the future of this project? Now, specifically this morning, I want to address these 2 issues. There has been a huge change of circumstances since that letter was written. Circumstances that are much worse for the High-Speed Rail Authority than they were in May 2012. There has been a huge deterioration in the chances for success since you wrote that letter. And therefore, there is only one conclusion. It is appropriate for you, in light of these changed circumstances since 2012, to withdraw your support from the high-speed rail project. Now, let me address the issue of costs first. Ms. Bushigian is right. Initially, the voters were told this project would cost $33 billion. Then it went up to 45. Next, it went up to $110 billion. At that point, there was panic in the administration. You just could not abide this. And so the authority was ordered to lower the costs. Allegedly, they did, saying it's now going to cost 68 to 76 billion. Low 68, high 76. Whether that's true or not, we don't know. That estimate is now 2.5 years old. What is it today? We don't really know. But is it a true estimate? Some experts say this project will cost as much as $200 billion. One thing is clear, though. What the authority never has told us is what phase 2 of the project is going to cost. This is a statewide project. Phase 1 is LA to San Francisco. Phase 2 is San Diego, the Inland Empire, San Bernardino, Sacramento, and Oakland. Those people are not potted plants who live in those areas. They expect something to be built for them, but there has been complete silence from the authority as to phase 2 and what that will cost. That has to be added on to the $76 billion. It certainly will take it over 100, perhaps even up to 150 or $200 billion. Now, the high-speed rail from the beginning has said this to the people of California. This is going to be a partnership. The state, through Proposition 1A and that $9.5 billion bond fund, that's one partner. The federal government is another partner. And private investors will be the third partner. With 33, it's a nice, neat little formula, isn't it? 10 from Prop 1A, 10 from the feds, 10 from private investors. Here we go. The deterioration since you wrote your letter. What's happened to the partnership? It's disappeared. In 2012 and 2013, the federal government announced not one dime more will go to California for this project. Congress is fed up with this project because of its wastefulness and the incompetence of the authority. Not one dime more. That was passed by the House, the Senate, and signed by President Obama in 2 transportation bills. So there goes the federal partnership. And the authority during these days was telling everybody, oh, usually in these projects, the federal government finances 50% of the project. We'll get 17 to 18 billion dollars from the federal government. And now as we sit here today, they're not going to get one dime more. All they have is that $3.3 billion, which was given years ago, and nothing more. And what about the private investors? We were told they would flock to this project. Not one private investor has expressed interest since Proposition 1A was passed 6 years ago. Not one. Zero interest. Why? Because this is an enormous money loser. And the private investors are not the least bit interested in this project. On the issue of costs, the chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee was a Democrat named Alan Lowenthal. The vice chairman was a Democrat, Joe Simidian. Mr. Lowenthal is currently in Congress. Mr. Simidian is on the Board of Supervisors in Santa Clara County. Mr. Simidian stood up before the legislature, and he and Mr. Lowenthal, both Democrats, voted no. In July 2012, we vote no on this project. We have lived with this project. We have shepherded through. We have been the chairman for most of the important hearings. We have heard the testimony. California cannot afford it. Mr. Simidian said, it's at least an $80 billion project. He was very prescient. He said, we will get no help. No help. It will be on our backs, and on our backs alone. And he has been quite accurate on that. Now, I want to talk about another aspect which Mr. Perea touched on. Is there a sound funding plan? Now, this is how Proposition 1A sets it up. It says, first, the authority chooses the initial segment that they're going to build. They did. It goes from Merced to the San Fernando Valley in the LA Basin. It's 300 miles long. They picked it. They picked it unequivocally. 300 miles. Then Proposition 1A says, for protective purposes, you can't start construction until you have the money in the bank to complete, I emphasize that word, to complete the entire segment that you picked. How much do they have in the bank? $3 billion from the feds, a possibility of getting 3 from Prop 1A, no more, because only what matching funds can come out. So they've got 6. How much do they need? By today's estimates, 35 billion. So they have about 20% of what they need. I'm sorry, that's not enough to complete the segment that they picked, and that is an absolute requirement. Why did the legislature wisely do this? They didn't want an abandoned project. They didn't want an uncompleted project. Do you want a project abandoned in downtown Fresno with all the damage and the collateral damage and the ugliness and so forth and the blight that that can cause? So that's why they picked that. And that's a very important violation of Proposition 1A and why they cannot start this project until they get the money in the bank. And again, change of circumstances. No more federal money, no more private investors. Where are they going to get the money? Cap and trade, 1%. It provides 1% of the gap that they need to fill. That is nothing. Even as late as March 27, before the Senate Transportation Committee, Chairman DeSaulnier, the LAO and even the peer review group said there's a huge gap in funding. How's it going to be filled? We don't know. We do not know how this gap is going to be filled. And Mr. Perea also said he was very interested in what the LAO and the state auditor said about this. Well, I'll tell you, consistently from when Proposition 1A was enacted and even before that, the LAO has always said there is no compliance with the funding requirements of Prop 1A. They are way short, and we do not know how they're going to fill the gap. Now let me make one other comment about another concern of Mr. Perea's. He was very prescient. He said, is there going to be 5 years of environmental delays? You are absolutely right. There will be more than that. Here's why. The legislature, again, very wisely said, you can't start construction until you get all the environmental clearances for the entire usable segment that you picked. What is that? Merced to the San Fernando Valley. How much do they have? They have Merced to Bakersfield. They have nothing beyond Bakersfield. And what lies beyond Bakersfield for this project? The Tehachapi Mountains. No grid, incredibly difficult engineering and environmental challenges, all the way through Palmdale down to Sylmar in the San Fernando Valley. No environmental clearances. That will take years. Why did the legislature do this? Because they didn't want a project to start and then somebody finds a squirrel or a rat or a fox or a bush or a plant and stops the project. You people in this county know better than anybody in the country how these things can stop. You don't have any water as a result of that. Is that my time?
Madam Clerk, is that the 10-minute?
Yes, it is.
If you could complete it in 30 seconds and just draw your comments to a conclusion.
I will be happy to. And the final concern of Mr. Perea, are the voters going to get what they were promised? The answer is no, because shortly after your letter, or almost at the same time, the legislature and the authority adopted the blended system, which completely changes the project. You have Mr. Kopp's declaration. It makes it, he says, this makes it impossible. If the high-speed rail has to share tracks with local commuter trains, it will never be able to achieve the trip time goals, the profit, the headway necessary. It completely undermines the promise to the voters that a genuine high-speed rail system would be provided to California. He's the father of high-speed rail, and that's what he says. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Maybe this might be an opportune time to remind, or to at least tell folks, if they have to be reminded. Let's make certain that we refrain from clapping or shouting. I know that there are some passions both for and against this project, but in the interest of time and making certain that decorum is maintained, we'd be most appreciative. Mr. Morales, welcome to Fresno County.
Thank you, sir.
All right,
Supervisor,
please.
I appreciate the chance to be here. Before I get into my comments, I want to touch on some things Mr. Brady spoke to, and I think first I want to point out one of the things our opponents often talk about is the importance of transparency, and I couldn't agree more with it, and it's something that we strive for and have worked very hard to achieve. Unfortunately, that doesn't seem to work both ways. What Mr. Brady
pull the mic closer to you, please.
What Mr. Brady should have disclosed to you, I believe, is that he is an attorney representing opponents of the project, litigating this project. Individuals who have absolute rights to oppose the project, but they are individual property owners. So to come up and make a presentation without disclosing that, I just have to raise some concerns, and I would hope maybe he could address that and why that wasn't disclosed.
Why don't you disclose who you are, too, while we're at it?
Fair enough.
Okay.
I am Jeff Morales. I'm the CEO of the High Speed Rail Authority. Let me thank the supervisors. The county has been an important partner in this program, in past years and currently. We've worked closely with a number of the supervisors, current and past. We have very important partnerships with the Economic Development Corporation, with the Economic Opportunities Commission, with the Workforce Investment Board, with the COG, and we value that partnership, and it's critical as we move forward. And I look forward to continuing that partnership with you. What I'd like to do is focus on three areas. One, the progress that we are making in the program and have made. Two, addressing some of the misconceptions, some of which you just heard. And three, then the path moving forward and how we are moving forward and how we will move forward with you. In terms of progress, and I think in many respects you have to look at 2008 as the starting point of this program. Obviously there was a lot of activity before, but until Proposition 1A passed, there was no funding at all for the development and implementation of high-speed rail in California. That was the first step. So the end of 2008 was really the starting point in many respects. And when you look at a major program of this scale, I think the progress is really pretty remarkable since that time. Just a few of the highlights. In the last 2 years, we've secured the environmental approvals at both the state and the federal levels for the segments from Merced to Fresno, and then to just recently Fresno to Bakersfield. We've advanced the environmental clearances on the other segments around the state. We've entered into an agreement with the San Joaquin Air Pollution Control District to address a critical issue here in the valley, which is air quality. I don't need to tell you about the air quality issues here, the asthma rates among children. We have entered into an agreement where we are going to fund through a voluntary emissions reduction agreement. We will be emissions neutral during construction of the program. We will make near-term investments in things that are of importance here locally, replacing old diesel irrigation pumps, old tractors, old buses through their program. We are funding that as part of our mitigation. We will be planting trees. We'll be taking any number of steps. We've required our contractors to employ the very latest EPA-certified equipment to ensure that we are as environmentally friendly as can be during the construction of the project, as well as obviously once we're in operation. We have enacted our first construction contract that was executed last August and is underway, and just yesterday you saw some of the physical work being done with removal of one of the first buildings that will be in the right-of-way and the start of real work. And I want to stress, as part of that, we have made a very strong commitment to making sure that the benefits accrue locally here in Fresno and here in the Valley, and I think you'll hear more about that from some others later. I just want to very quickly note that there are already 71 Central Valley companies under contract. There are 47 companies who are either based in or working out of Fresno County who have contracts currently. And that work is underway, and it's in spite of the litigation that's taken place. I'd like to quickly address some of the assertions that have been made and you just heard repeated. Early in my career, I worked in the U.S. Senate, and I had the privilege of working around Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who had a great quote, which you're probably familiar with, which is, "Everyone's entitled to their own opinion, but not their own facts." And what we hear a lot are opinions, not based in fact. The reality is all of our work, as it should be, goes through extensive peer review groups that either we have composed or that the legislature has appointed. We have also had external independent federal oversight of the program through the Government Accountability Office, reviewing any and all of our information. So when we put out numbers, they are scrubbed and they are reviewed by multiple parties. When you hear assertions made like the ones you just did, they've gone through none of that, and they are just assertions, and I'll touch on a few specifically. The idea of a $200 billion cost, that just comes from nowhere. There's no basis for that anywhere. Somebody just made up a number. The idea of phase 2 not being in the system, as if that's something the authority were hiding from the public. Prop 1A specifically limits what we are supposed to report and develop cost estimates to phase 1 of the system, which is San Francisco, Los Angeles. It makes that very clear delineation. We will ultimately develop those costs, but not now. The trip time, the 2 hours and 40 minutes, that's a design requirement that is in Prop 1A, and we are meeting it. In fact, the The current runtime, express runtime between San Francisco and LA is 2 hours and 32 minutes. It's been suggested that we won't be able to achieve the speeds that were called for of 220 miles an hour. Absolutely not true. In fact, the system is being designed to achieve almost 250 miles an hour. We have to do that in order to be able to operate the trains at 220 miles an hour. The system is being designed, the trains will be capable of doing that, and they will operate at those speeds. It's been suggested that the system will require subsidies. Again, not the case. Our business plans make that clear, the numbers make it clear, and those business plans have been reviewed by the legislatively appointed peer review group, among others. People like to play with numbers, and they talk about systems around the world. The fact is, every system around the world, high-speed rail system, on an operational basis is profitable. That is, that its operating revenues exceed its operating costs. That's true even here in the U.S. in the Northeast Corridor. Amtrak's Acela service, which is the closest thing we have to high-speed rail in the U.S., running between Washington and Boston, operates at a profit and in fact subsidizes the rest of the Amtrak system. And our numbers go into great detail in explaining how that will work and why it will work. There's been talk about no money, money either having evaporated or gone away. Let's again look back at 2008 when Prop 1A passed. There was not a single dime of federal money available at that time. There never had been a dime of federal money available at that time. There was no other state funding. Today we have $3.3 billion in federal funds committed to this project, and some of it going to work. In fact, the jobs that are being created right here in Fresno are being created with those federal funds that did not exist in 2008. In addition, just through the budget this summer, the legislature has now committed, not just for this year, but on an ongoing basis, cap and trade funding for this program to keep it going. So we are well ahead of where we were in 2008 in terms of the funding situation. And with regard to private investment, I can tell you private interest is very strong, it's very active, and it will be there. The issue on that is timing. Many of you are involved in private enterprises, and you know how the private sector works. They don't invest at the front end. They come in when it's appropriate. And we have outlined when and where that will take place. But we just saw, and I'd be happy to provide the board for the record copies of letters that a dozen or so international private firms submitted to the legislature supporting the cap and trade investment because it would, in fact, trigger private participation in the program. I also just want to talk about economic viability, and I think you've got to look at this two ways. There's no question, development of a system like this, much like the development of the state highway system, like the development of an airport, like the expansion of any major infrastructure, costs a lot of money. But let's look at the alternatives. We face a growing population in the state. It's going to hit 50 million people in the next few decades. To accommodate that growth and keep this state moving, it would cost 2.5 to 3 times as much as it would cost to build a high-speed rail system to make the same level of investments in roads and airports and in runways. So you have to look at both sides of the equation, the cost of doing something and the cost of not doing it, and what it may cost us through other ways. In closing, let me just say I think one thing is important to keep in mind here, and I think it's certainly true here in Fresno, and I say this in a lot of my talks, that this really isn't about a train. This is about connecting this state and connecting the economies, connecting the communities of this state. The Central Valley has been isolated from the rest of the state in many ways, and it's shown that, and that's one of the reasons we see the unemployment rate stuck where it is, why we see air quality issues, why we see young people who feel they have to leave and go somewhere else. I'll wrap up in 30 seconds. What this system will do and what it was intended to do, and I think very wisely by the writers of 1A, and it's what we're building, is a system that will for the first time connect the entire state, connect Fresno to Silicon Valley to Bakersfield. I mean, imagine the difference when Silicon Valley is 45 minutes away from Fresno instead of 2 or 3 hours. Think about just Bakersfield. Instead of being 2 hours driving, it's 40 minutes or less by train. Those are game changers in terms of what it can mean for this region. So with that, I appreciate again the opportunity to be here and look forward to continuing to work with you and the county and appreciate your interest. Thank you.